The mining colony on Kepler 442b was supposed to be Jake Morrison's fresh start. After losing his family in the Mars incident, he'd taken the most remote job he could find. Now, as he trudged through the purple sand dunes under twin suns, his scanner beeped steadily, searching for rare minerals. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead, adjusting his environmental suit. The planet was harsh, but beautiful. Crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, and the sky shimmered with colors that didn't exist on Earth. He'd been alone out here for 6 months, and that was exactly how he wanted it. The scanner's beeping suddenly changed pitch. Jake frowned, checking the display. The readings were strange. Not mineral signatures, but something organic. That was impossible. Kepler 442b had been thoroughly surveyed. No life forms existed here except for the humans in the sealed colony 20 kilometers away. Following the signal, Jake climbed over a ridge and stopped dead in his tracks. In a shallow crater below, something moved. It wasn't rock or crystal. It was alive. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The creature was about the size of a large dog, covered in scales that shifted color like oil on water. 4 legs ended in clawed feet, and from its back sprouted what could only be wings, though they were currently folded tight against its body. Its long tail curled around itself protectively. A dragon. There was no other word for it. The creature lifted its head weakly, revealing eyes that glowed with an inner fire. Those eyes fixed on Jake, and he felt a jolt of connection that made him stumble. The dragon was young, a hatchling, his mind supplied, though he had no idea how he knew that. And it was dying. Jake could see the problem immediately. A piece of sharp crystal had pierced through the dragon's left wing, pinning it to the ground. Dark blood pooled beneath it, staining the purple sand black. The hatchling had probably been there for days. Every protocol screamed at him to report this immediately. First contact with an alien species was the biggest event in human history. He should call the colony, bring the scientists, let the experts handle this. But looking at those pain-filled eyes, Jake knew the hatchling would be dead long before help arrived. He made his decision. Moving slowly, Jake approached the injured creature. The hatchling tensed, letting out a sound somewhere between a growl and a whimper. Jake held up his hands, trying to project calm. He had no idea if the gesture meant anything to an alien, but it was all he had. "Easy there," he said softly. "I'm going to help you." The dragon's eyes tracked his movement as he circled around to examine the wound. The crystal shard had gone clean through the wing membrane. If Jake pulled it out, the hatchling might bleed to death. If he left it in, infection would kill it just as surely. Jake opened his emergency kit. He had basic medical supplies, but they were designed for humans, not alien dragons. Still, some principles had to be universal. Stop the bleeding. Prevent infection. Hope for the best. He pulled out a canister of biofoam, the same stuff that had saved countless human lives on battlefields across the galaxy. Would it work on alien physiology? Only one way to find out. The hatchling watched him prepare. Its breathing labored. Jake met its eyes again, and felt that strange connection strengthen. It was like the creature was looking straight into his soul, judging whether to trust him. After a long moment, the tension in its body eased slightly. "Okay," Jake whispered. "This is going to hurt." He gripped the crystal shard firmly. The hatchling's body went rigid. Then, in one smooth motion, Jake pulled it free and immediately sprayed biofoam into the wound. The foam expanded, sealing the torn tissue and stopping the bleeding. The hatchling let out a shriek that made Jake's ears ring even through his helmet. Its tail whipped around, catching him in the chest and sending him flying. Jake hit the ground hard, gasping for breath. When he looked up, the dragon was standing on shaky legs, wings spread for balance. The biofoam had hardened into a protective shell over the wound. The hatchling looked at him, and Jake could have sworn he saw surprise in those fiery eyes. Moving carefully, Jake sat up. "You're welcome," he said dryly. The hatchling tilted its head, studying him. Then it took a tentative step forward, and another. Jake remained still as the alien creature approached. fighting every instinct that told him to run. This close, he could see details he'd missed before. The scales weren't just colorful. They held patterns that seemed to shift and move. Like writing that wouldn't quite come into focus, the dragon stopped just out of arm's reach. It lowered its head and made a sound Jake had never heard before. A musical trill that resonated in his chest. Then, before he could react, it pressed its forehead against his gloved hand. The world exploded. Images flooded Jake's mind. A vast city of crystal spires floating in clouds. Dragons of every size and color soaring between the towers. A civilization old beyond measure, proud and powerful. And then, darkness. Ships appearing in the sky. War. Dragons falling like burning stars. A desperate escape. Eggs hidden across the galaxy. Waiting. Hoping. Jake gasped, pulling his hand back. The vision faded, leaving him shaking. The hatchling. No. Her name was Sith-Ara. The knowledge simply appeared in his mind. Looked at him with something like hope. Your people, Jake said hoarsely. They're out there, looking for you. Sith-Ara made another musical sound, this one tinged with sadness. She was the first to hatch in centuries. Alone on this barren world, she had waited, sending out psychic calls that went unanswered, until now. Jake's communicator crackled to life, making them both jump. Morrison, this is Colony Base. You're overdue for check-in. Status report. Jake looked at Sith-Ara. Reporting her would mean scientists, soldiers, containment. They'd study her, cage her, turn her into humanity's greatest discovery. Or he could lie, give her time to heal, figure out what came next. Morrison here, he said into the comm. All clear. Just tracking down some unusual mineral readings. Nothing significant. Copy that. Don't stay out too long. Storm system moving in from the north. Understood. Morrison out. Sith-Ara tilted her head, and Jake felt a pulse of gratitude through their strange connection. He'd bought them time, but not much. The colony would send someone to check on him if he didn't return soon. Can you fly? Jake asked, gesturing at her injured wing. Sith-Ara spread her wings experimentally. The left one moved stiffly, the biofoam restricting its range of motion. But it seemed functional. She gave him what he was starting to recognize as a nod. Good. Because we need to get you somewhere safe. Jake's mind raced. There were caves in the mountain range to the east, far from the colony's usual survey routes. He could set up a shelter there, bring supplies. It wasn't a long-term solution, but it would give them breathing room. As if reading his thoughts, and maybe she was, Sith-Ara moved closer. She was bigger than he'd first thought, her head reaching his chest even as a hatchling. How large did adult dragons grow? The visions had shown creatures the size of buildings. This is insane, Jake muttered, but he was already running through supply lists in his head. Food, water, medical equipment. How did you take care of a baby dragon? What did they even eat? Sith-Ara answered that question by suddenly pouncing on a crystal formation, biting off a chunk and swallowing it whole. Crystal eater. That explained the powerful jaws and sharp teeth. At least food wouldn't be a problem on a planet covered in the stuff. The twin suns were starting to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. Jake made his decision. Follow me, he said, starting toward the mountains. Stay low and try not to be seen. My people, they wouldn't understand. Not yet. Sith-Ara fell into step beside him, her movements growing stronger with each passing minute. Whatever was in that biofoam, it was working better than Jake had dared hope. Maybe human and dragon biology weren't so incompatible after all. As they walked, Jake felt the connection between them pulse with unspoken communication. Images, feelings, concepts that didn't quite translate to human language. He learned that Sith-Ara's egg had been programmed with genetic memories, knowledge passed down from her ancestors. She knew about humans, had been watching the colony from afar, trying to decide if they were friend or foe. His act of kindness had answered that question. They reached the foothills as darkness fell, Kepler 442b had no moon, and the night was absolute. Jake activated his suit's lights, but Sithara needed no help navigating. Her eyes glowed brighter in the darkness, and she guided him through paths he would never have found alone. The cave Sithara led him to was perfect. Hidden behind a fall of crystal curtains, it opened into a large chamber with a fresh water spring. Something, had lived here before. Jake could see the remains of carved symbols on the walls, too eroded by time to read. "Your people were here," Jake said. It wasn't a question. Sithara touched one of the symbols with her tail, and for a moment it glowed faintly. A marker. A sign for others who might come looking. But centuries had passed, and no one had come, until now. Jake set down his pack and pulled out emergency rations. He offered one to Sithara, who sniffed it curiously before pushing it back toward him with her nose. Right. Crystal Eater. He'd have to remember that, as he ate. Jake considered the magnitude of what had happened. First contact. Actual, undeniable first contact with an intelligent alien species. And he'd decided to hide it. But looking at Sithara, seeing the intelligence and emotion in her eyes, he knew he'd made the right choice. Humanity's track record with newly discovered species wasn't great. Even with laws and protections in place, there would be those who saw Sithara as a resource to be exploited, rather than a being to be protected. His communicator buzzed with an incoming message. Jake's heart sank as he read it. Colony administration had noted irregularities in his survey route. They were sending a team to check on him in the morning. Sithara must have sensed his distress because she moved closer, pressing against his side. The warmth of her body was comforting even through his environmental suit. She made a questioning trill. "We have a problem," Jake said, showing her the message. He wasn't sure how much she understood, but her eyes narrowed as she studied the screen. Then she did something that shocked him. She placed her clawed foot on the ground and began to draw. Not random scratches, but deliberate symbols. Mathematical equations. Star charts. A message. Jake watched in amazement as Sithara created a complex diagram showing planetary positions, trajectories, and what could only be a schedule. She was showing him something that would happen in 3 days. An alignment. A window. She looked at him expectantly, then drew more symbols. These showed dragons, many dragons, converging on a single point. A gathering, a rescue. "Your people," Jake breathed. "They're coming for you." Sithara nodded, but her expression was troubled. She drew more symbols, these showing human figures. Some stood with dragons. Others attacked them. A choice. Jake understood. When the dragons came, humanity would have to decide, friend or foe, peace or war. And that decision might be influenced by how the first meeting went. How Sithara was treated, whether she was free or captive. 3 days, Jake said. "We need to keep you hidden for 3 days." It seemed impossible. The colony would search for him. They had satellites, drones, sensors. How could they hide a dragon, even a young one, from all of that? But as Jake looked into Sithara's trusting eyes, he knew he had to try. The fate of 2 species might depend on it. He opened his communicator and began typing a message to the colony. Equipment malfunction. Shelter needed for repairs. Would report in when fixed. It would buy them a day. Maybe 2. After that, he'd have to get creative. Sithara curled up beside him as he worked, her breathing already evening out into sleep. The biofoam on her wing glowed faintly in the darkness, healing her with human technology. It seemed fitting somehow. A bridge between species, built from an act of compassion. Jake allowed himself a small smile. He'd come to Kepler 442b to escape, to hide from a galaxy that had taken everything from him. Instead, he'd found purpose. Protecting Sithara, ensuring her people found her safe and well, might be the most important thing he'd ever do. As the night deepened, Jake began to plan. He'd need supplies from his hidden caches, equipment the colony didn't know about. His years of solitude had made him paranoid. But that paranoia might save them now. He had food, water, and medical supplies scattered across the region. More importantly, he had signal jammers and camouflage netting that could hide them from aerial surveillance. Cythara stirred in her sleep, making soft, chirping sounds. Jake wondered what dragons dreamed about. Flying through stars? Ancient memories of their lost homeworld? Or maybe, like him, she dreamed of family. The thought hit him unexpectedly hard. Family. He'd lost his on Mars, but maybe he'd found something new. Not a replacement, but a connection, just as profound. A young alien who trusted him with her life, and whose life might determine the future of both their species. Jake settled back against the cave wall, keeping watch. Tomorrow would bring challenges, but tonight, they were safe. A human and a dragon, hidden away in a cave on an alien world, bound together by an act of kindness that might change the galaxy. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, and among them, somewhere, a dragon fleet drew ever closer. 3 days. They just had to survive 3 days. Jake's hand found Cythara's head, stroking the smooth scales. She purred in her sleep, a sound that vibrated through his bones. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered. "I promise." And in the depths of the cave, ancient symbols flickered to life one by one, responding to the presence of a dragon after centuries of darkness. The message they sent was simple, broadcast on frequencies no human technology could detect. Hope lives. The lost one is found. Come home. The morning came too quickly. Jake woke to find Cythara, already alert, her glowing eyes fixed on the cave entrance. Through their connection, he felt her unease. Danger approaching. Jake checked his scanner and swore softly. 3 aerial drones were sweeping the area, search pattern expanding from his last known position. The colony had started looking for him sooner than expected. "Time to move," he whispered. Cythara stood, testing her injured wing. The biofoam had done its work overnight. The wound was already healing at a rate that defied explanation. Dragon physiology was remarkable. She could glide now, though sustained flight was still beyond her. Jake pulled out his signal jammer, a military-grade device he'd kept from his old life. It would hide them from the drones, but only within a 50-meter radius. They'd have to stay close and move carefully. They slipped out of the cave just as the first drone passed overhead. Jake's heart pounded as they pressed against a crystal formation, the jammer humming quietly. The drone paused, hovering, its sensors sweeping the area. Then it moved on. Cythara looked at him with something like respect. Through their connection, he felt her surprise that he'd come prepared for this. Jake smiled grimly. 5 years in the military had taught him the value of having backup plans. They moved east, deeper into the mountains. Jake knew of another cave system there, more extensive and harder to search. But it meant crossing open ground, exposed and vulnerable. As they traveled, Cythara began to teach him. Not with words, but with images and feelings pressed directly into his mind. She showed him how her people communicated, a complex blend of telepathy, sound, and color patterns in their scales. Jake found himself understanding more with each passing hour, their connection deepening beyond mere emergency communication. She was young by dragon standards, barely 40 Earth years old, though she'd spent most of that time dormant in her egg. Her genetic memories gave her the knowledge of an adult. But emotionally, she was still a child. A child who had awakened alone on an alien world, waiting for a rescue that might never come. Jake felt a fierce protectiveness rise in him. He'd failed to save his own family, but he would not fail Cythara. They were halfway to the new cave system when Jake's communicator crackled with an emergency broadcast. He froze, listening. "Repeat. All personnel return to base immediately. Unknown energy signatures detected in system. Possible first contact scenario." "This is not a drill." Cythara's head snapped up, her scales rippling with color. Through their bond, Jake felt her excitement and fear. Her people were early. The rescue fleet had arrived 2 days ahead of schedule, but that meant humanity and dragonkind were about to meet without preparation, without context. without the crucial buffer of Sithara being safe and well treated when they arrived. "We need to get to them first," Jake said. "Show them you're okay, that humans helped you." Sithara nodded, but gestured at the sky. Drones were everywhere now. The colony, in full alert mode. They'd never make it to a communication array without being caught. Then Jake remembered something. His old emergency beacon, modified with military encryption. It was in his cache, near the northern ridge. If he could boost its signal, maybe they could send a message directly to the Dragon fleet. They changed direction, moving north. The terrain grew rougher. Crystal formations giving way to sharp volcanic rock. Jake's suit registered increasing radiation levels. They were near the planet's old impact craters, where ancient meteors had left the land scarred and dangerous, perfect for hiding from sensors. As they climbed, Sithara began to struggle. She was young, injured, and had been surviving on minimal food for who knew how long before Jake found her. He called a halt in a sheltered overhang. "Rest," he said firmly. "We're no good to anyone if you collapse." Sithara resisted, projecting urgency through their bond. But Jake wouldn't budge. He pulled out his water supply and offered it to her. She drank gratefully, then curled against him, exhausted. While she rested, Jake monitored the communications. The colony was in chaos. The energy signatures had resolved into ships. Massive ones, using technology humans couldn't begin to understand. They were holding position just outside the system, waiting. For what? For Sithara, Jake realized. They knew she was here. The ancient symbols in the cave. She'd activated them, sent a signal. They were waiting for confirmation that she was alive and safe before making contact. Jake's communicator buzzed with a private message. His blood ran cold as he read it. "Morrison, we know you're out there." Satellites caught 2 heat signatures moving together. "You've made contact, haven't you? Don't do anything stupid. Bring it in, and you'll be a hero." The scientist who discovered alien life. Think about it. They knew. Maybe not exactly what he'd found, but they knew he wasn't alone. Sithara stirred, sensing his distress. She looked at the message, and then at him, question in her eyes. Would he betray her for glory? For safety? Jake deleted the message and turned off his communicator. "Come on," he said. "We're almost there." The cache was exactly where he'd left it, hidden beneath a false rock formation. Jake pulled out the beacon and began modifications. Hands moving with practiced efficiency. Military training never really left you. Sithara watched, fascinated. Through their bond, he felt her amazement at human technology. It was crude compared to dragon tech, but effective in its simplicity. She began to help, using her claws with delicate precision to adjust components he couldn't reach. Together, they worked to boost the signal, to punch through the interference and reach the dragon fleet. Jake input the mathematical equations Sithara had drawn, hoping they would serve as identification codes. The beacon hummed to life, sending its message to the stars. Now, they waited. They didn't wait long. A shadow fell across them, and Jake looked up to see a colonial military transport hovering overhead. Soldiers rappelled down. Weapons drawn but not aimed. Yet, "Jake Morrison," the squad leader called out. "By order of colonial authority, you will surrender the alien entity immediately." Jake stepped in front of Sithara. "No. Don't be stupid, Morrison. You're outnumbered and outgunned. We don't want to hurt either of you, but we will if necessary." Sithara pressed against his back, trembling. Not with fear, Jake realized, but with rage. Through their bond, he felt her preparing to fight. Her scales began to glow, patterns shifting in ways that made the soldiers step back nervously. "She's a child," Jake said loudly. "A scared child who just wants to go home. Is this how humanity wants to introduce itself to the galaxy? By traumatizing children?" The squad leader hesitated. Jake pressed on. "Her people are already here. Those ships in the system? They're hers. They're waiting for her signal. What do you think happens if she tells them humans hurt her? If she shows up injured or frightened?" "That's not your call to make," the leader said. But Jake heard uncertainty in his voice. Maybe not, Jake agreed. But it's hers. He turned to Cythera and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. What do you want to do? Cythera looked at the soldiers, at their weapons and fearful faces. Then she did something that changed everything. She stepped out from behind Jake, spread her wings wide, and sang. It wasn't like any sound Jake had heard her make before. It was beautiful and terrible, joyous and mournful. A song that spoke of loss and hope, of children scattered across the stars, and parents searching through centuries of darkness. It was the song of her people, and it resonated in every crystal formation for kilometers around, turning the landscape into a vast musical instrument. The soldiers lowered their weapons, some with tears streaming down their faces. The squad leader pulled off his helmet, staring at Cythera with awe. And in orbit, the dragon fleet responded. Jake's modified beacon screamed with incoming signals. The transport's pilot shouted something about massive energy spikes. Then the sky tore open. A portal, for lack of a better word. A hole in space itself, edges crackling with impossible colors. And through it came dragons, not one or two, but dozens. Then hundreds. They poured through the portal like a living river of scales and wings, each one unique, each one magnificent. Some were small as house cats, others large as buildings. They filled the sky, their combined song shaking the earth. The soldiers scattered, but the dragons paid them no mind. They had eyes only for Cythera. A great dragon landed before them. Scales like polished gold, eyes ancient beyond measure. It lowered its massive head to Cythera's level and crooned softly. Through his bond with Cythera, Jake understood. Mother. Not her biological mother. Dragons didn't work that way. But the matriarch of her clan. The one who had overseen the scattering of eggs, who had searched for centuries without hope. Cythera ran to her, chirping excitedly. They touched foreheads, and light exploded between them, sharing memories, experiences. Cythera's time alone, her injury, her rescue. The great dragon's eyes turned to Jake. He stood his ground as she approached, though every instinct screamed at him to run. She was massive, could crush him without effort. But in her eyes, he saw intelligence, wisdom, and something else, gratitude. She lowered her head until she was eye level with him. Then, like Cythera had done, she pressed her forehead against his hand. The connection was overwhelming. Not just images this time, but full understanding. Jake saw the Dragon Empire at its height, peaceful explorers of the galaxy. He saw the coming of the Devourers, entities of pure destruction that consumed entire systems. The desperate fight, the evacuation, eggs hidden on thousands of worlds, waiting for the danger to pass. He saw Earth, too. Dragons had been there, long ago. They'd watched humanity's first steps, decided they showed promise, and left them to develop undisturbed. The myths and legends weren't myths at all, and he saw what came next. The Devourers were gone, destroyed in a final battle that had cost the dragons dearly. Now they gathered their scattered children, rebuilding. But they'd learned isolation meant vulnerability. They needed allies. They needed humanity. The vision faded, leaving Jake gasping. The great dragon, Cythera was her name, he now knew, pulled back and spoke. Not in sound, but directly into the minds of every human present. This one saved our daughter. Showed kindness, without expectation of reward. Risked his safety for hers. Is this the nature of humanity? The squad leader stepped forward, helmet under his arm. We try to be. We don't always succeed, but we try. Cythera considered this. Trying is what matters. Perfection is not expected, only the attempt. She turned back to Jake. You have given us hope that our children will be safe as they awaken across the galaxy. What can we give in return? Jake looked at Cythera, who had moved to stand beside him again. Just be our friends. Teach us. Let us teach you. That's all. The dragon matriarch's eyes sparkled with what might have been amusement. So modest. Very well. Friendship it is. But know that dragon friendship runs deep. Your people will never stand alone in the darkness. This we swear. The colonial transport had been joined by others. Officials were arriving. Scientists. Diplomats. The first contact they'd all dreamed of was happening. But not how anyone had imagined. There's going to be fear, Jake warned Keithara. Misunderstandings. Not everyone will accept you easily. We have time, she replied. Centuries of patience we have learned. And we have something else now. What's that? Examples. Stories. A human who saved a dragon child, asking nothing in return. A dragon child who trusted a human with her life. These stories spread faster than fear, shine brighter than doubt. Cythera nuzzled against Jake's side, purring. Through their bond, she shared her happiness. She'd found her people. But she'd also found something else. Family of a different kind. Over the next hours, Jake watched humanity and dragonkind take their first tentative steps together. Scientists compared notes with dragon scholars through telepathic translation. Soldiers marveled at dragon flying techniques. Children from the colony were brought to meet young dragons, fear turning to delight within moments. But through it all, Cythera stayed by his side. You know you can go with them, Jake said quietly. Your clan, your people. You're safe now. Cythera looked up at him. And he felt her decision through their bond before she expressed it. She turned to Keithara and sang a short melody. The matriarch listened, then nodded slowly. Cythera wishes to stay, Keithara announced. To be a bridge between our peoples. To learn human ways as humans learn ours. If this is acceptable? Jake's throat tightened. More than acceptable. As the sun set on Kepler 442b, dragons and humans worked together to establish the first joint embassy. It would be rough, Jake knew. There would be those on both sides who resisted, who feared the other. But looking at Cythera playing with human children while their parents spoke with dragon elders, he had hope. His communicator buzzed. Another message from colony administration. But this time the tone was very different. Commendations. Requests for interviews. Job offers from xenobiology departments across human space. Jake deleted them all and sat beside Cythera, watching the stars emerge. Somewhere among them were more dragon eggs, waiting to hatch. More lost children, who would need finding, protecting, befriending. So, he said to Cythera, want to help me find your siblings? Her joy through their bond was answer enough. The stars wheeled overhead, and for the first time in years, Jake Morrison looked forward to tomorrow. He'd come to Kepler 442b to escape his past. Instead, he'd found his future. A future where humans and dragons stood together against the darkness, bound by the simplest and strongest of ties, the bond between one who needed help and one who chose to give it. And it all started with a single act of kindness in a purple desert, under alien suns. 6 months later, Earth's greatest leaders gathered in the United Nations Grand Assembly. The hall had been expanded and modified to accommodate their new allies. Dragon perches lined the upper galleries, and the air shimmered with the heat of their presence. Jake Morrison sat in the witness chair, feeling out of place in his formal suit. Beside him, Cythera had grown considerably, now the size of a small horse. Her scales gleamed with health. The old wing injury just a faint scar. She wore a translation collar that converted her telepathic communications to audible speech, though she rarely used it. Their bond made it unnecessary. Mr. Morrison, the Secretary General began. You stand accused of withholding first contact information from proper authorities, endangering colonial security, and making unauthorized diplomatic decisions on behalf of humanity. How do you plead? Before Jake could answer, Cythera stood, her scales rippling with indignation. He pleads heroic, she said through the collar, her young voice ringing clear. Is saving lives now crime and human law? A murmur ran through the assembly. In the dragon galleries, scales flickered in patterns of agreement. Kithara watched from the largest perch, her ancient eyes thoughtful. The law is clear, one counselor insisted. First contact protocols exist for a reason. One man cannot decide the fate of our species. Yet one man did. Kithara interjected, her mental voice touching every mind present. And because of his decision, we meet as friends rather than suspicious strangers. Show us the law that values protocol over compassion, and we will show you why such laws lead to darkness. Jake finally spoke. I made a choice, not as a representative of humanity, but as a person who found someone in need. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty, but I'd make the same choice again. The assembly erupted in debate, but it was interrupted by alarms. Every screen in the hall flashed red. Emergency broadcasts from the outer colonies filled the air. They were under attack, not by dragons, but by something else. Ships of impossible design, beings of pure energy that drained life from entire planets. Jake's blood ran cold as he recognized them from Kithara's memories. The Devourers, he whispered. But you said they were destroyed. Kithara's mental voice was grim. We thought so. We were wrong. A remnant survived, grew strong in the void. And they've found us again. The assembly descended into chaos. But through it all, Jake noticed something. Humans and dragons weren't panicking separately. They were turning to each other, planning together. In 6 months, the two species had begun to truly integrate. Dragon technology enhanced human ships. Human creativity solved dragon resource problems. Together, they were stronger. We need the battle songs, a young dragon called out. The harmonics that disrupted their energy fields. We have them, Kithara confirmed. But we are too few. The songs require thousands of voices in perfect harmony. We have only hundreds. Jake felt Sithara tense beside him. Through their bond, an idea flowered. Dangerous, unprecedented, but possible. What if, Sithara said slowly, humans could sing with us? Every dragon in the hall turned to stare at her. The idea was absurd. Dragon battle songs operated on frequencies humans couldn't even hear, let alone reproduce. But Sithara continued, Jake and I share more than thoughts now. When I sing, he feels it in his bones. When he speaks, I understand not just words, but meaning. We are bonded. True bonded, as in the old tales. What if others could bond too? Kithara's eyes widened. Child, what you suggest hasn't been done since the First Age. The bonding you share was accident. Miracle. To attempt it deliberately, en masse, is our only chance? Jake interrupted, understanding flooding through him. The Devourers are coming. We have days, maybe hours. Traditional defenses won't work. You said so yourself. But if humans and dragons could truly join, truly become one force, the Secretary General stood. What would this require? Sithara and Jake exchanged glances. Trust, they said in unison. Complete trust. Over the next hours, Earth mobilized like never before. Not for war in the traditional sense, but for something unprecedented. Volunteers were called for, humans willing to attempt bonding with dragon partners. The response was overwhelming. Millions offered, though only a fraction would be compatible. Jake and Sithara became the template, their bond studied and analyzed. Dragon mind singers worked with human neuroscientists to understand the connection. It wasn't just telepathy. It was a fundamental linking of consciousness, made possible by the unique interaction between human neural plasticity and dragon psychic abilities. The first attempts were clumsy. Some pairs couldn't connect at all. Others formed bonds so weak they faded within minutes. But gradually, successes emerged. A soldier and a warrior dragon who shared similar protective instincts. A scientist and a scholar dragon whose curiosity resonated. A child and a hatchling who simply decided to be friends. Each bond was unique, shaped by the personalities involved. And with each success, the technique refined. Dragons learned to open their minds in new ways. Humans learned to quiet their thoughts and listen with more than ears. 3 days after the first devourer sighting, 10,000 bonded pairs stood ready. It wasn't enough. The battle songs traditionally required 10 times that number. But it would have to do. Jake stood on the command deck of humanity's newest ship, a hybrid of human and dragon technology. Cythera coiled around him, their bond humming with shared purpose. Through the viewports, he could see the Devourer fleet approaching Earth. Ships that weren't quite ships, beings that weren't quite alive, hungry voids that consumed everything they touched. All pairs, report readiness, Admiral Chen commanded. She stood beside her own partner, a scarred old battle dragon named Vareth. The responses came in, a mixture of human voices and dragon songs. Ready. Ready. Scared, but ready. Ready. Mr. Morrison, the Admiral said, as the first bonded pair. You and Cythera will lead the harmony. The rest will follow your frequency. Jake's mouth went dry. Admiral, I'm not a singer. I'm just a miner who got lucky. No. Cythera's voice filled the bridge. You are the human who chose compassion over protocol. The one who saved my daughter. The bridge between our species. If any can lead this song, it is you. The Devourer fleet grew closer, their wrongness making space itself recoil. Energy beings writhed within their vessels, reaching out with tendrils of pure consumption. The first human ships to engage them simply ceased to exist. Drained of all energy in seconds. Now, the Admiral commanded, Jake and Cythera began. It wasn't a song in any human sense. Jake opened his throat and let Cythera's voice flow through him, while she shaped her tones to resonate with his human vocal cords. The sound that emerged was neither human nor dragon, but something new, something impossible. Other pairs joined, each adding their unique harmony to the growing chorus. 10,000 throats singing as one, human and dragon united in purpose. The song built, layer upon layer, until it became a living thing that rippled through space itself. The Devourers recoiled. Their perfect unity of consumption met its opposite, the harmony of diverse voices choosing to sing together. Where they devoured, the song created. Where they divided, it unified. But it wasn't enough. The Devourers adapted, pushed forward. Some singers faltered, their bonds straining under the psychic pressure. The song began to fragment. We're losing it, someone reported. We need more voices. Then Jake heard it. Faint at first, but growing stronger. Earth itself was singing. Every human who had heard the dragon songs. Every child who had played with a hatchling. Every scientist who had marveled at dragon knowledge. They were humming, adding their voices to the chorus. They couldn't bond fully, couldn't hit the psychic frequencies, but they could support those who did. Billions of voices, each tiny alone, but together forming a foundation that the bonded pairs could build upon. The song strengthened, solidified, became unbreakable. The lead Devourer ship touched the wall of sound and screamed, a psychic shriek that shattered windows across Earth's moon bases. Cracks appeared in its form, spreading like ice on a warming lake. The entity tried to retreat, but the song followed, pursued, surrounded. One by one, the Devourers came apart. Not destroyed. Energy couldn't be destroyed. But transformed, their hunger replaced by harmony. Their unity of purpose shattered into individual notes that joined the grand chorus. They became part of the song that defeated them. When the last Devourer dissipated, silence fell across the solar system. Then, slowly, celebration began. Humans and dragons embraced, danced, cried with relief and joy. They had done the impossible. They had stood together and won. But in the quiet of the command deck, Jake felt Cythera trembling. Through their bond came exhaustion so profound it made his knees weak. The song had cost her more than she'd let on, cost all the dragons more. They'd pushed beyond their limits, opened their minds wider than ever before. Medical teams to all dragon partners, Jake called out, his voice cutting through the celebration. They're in trouble. The next hours were a blur of activity. Dragons collapsed across the fleet, their life force drained by the battle song. Human medical technology couldn't help. This was a spiritual wound, not a physical one. But the bonds worked both ways. As dragons had shared their strength with humans during the battle, now humans shared their life force with dragons. Partners refused to leave their dragons' sides, pouring energy through their connections, refusing to let go. Jake sat with Cythera in the medical bay, his hand on her head, feeling her struggle to breathe. Around them, thousands of pairs fought the same battle. Some bonds were too new, too weak. They shattered, leaving both partners forever changed. But most held, strengthened by shared struggle. "Stay with me," Jake whispered. "You started this. You showed us the way. Don't leave now." Cythera's mental voice was barely a whisper. Tired. So tired. But happy. "We did it. Together." "Together," Jake agreed, and opened his mind completely, holding nothing back. Every memory, every feeling, every spark of life he had, he offered to her, and felt her do the same. In that moment, they ceased to be two separate beings. They were one consciousness in two bodies. Human and dragon united in a way that transcended species. And in that unity, they found strength. Cythera's breathing steadied. Her eyes opened, brighter than before. Around them, other pairs were discovering the same truth. The battle had changed them, evolved their bonds into something deeper. They weren't just partners now, they were something new. When the immediate crisis passed, Jake found himself once again before the Earth's leaders. But this time, things were different. Half the assembly now included bonded pairs. The question of his crime seemed absurd in the face of what had happened. "Mr. Morrison," the Secretary General said, a small smile on her face, "in light of recent events, all charges against you have been dropped. Furthermore, we'd like to offer you a position as Earth's first ambassador to the Dragon clans, working alongside Cythera as humanity's representative in the new bonded council." Jake looked at Cythera, who radiated smugness through their bond. She'd known this was coming. "I accept," he said. "On one condition. The Council's first priority must be finding and protecting the remaining dragon eggs across the galaxy. No child, human or dragon, should wake up alone and afraid." "Agreed," Cythera said from her perch, "and we have located several promising signals already. The question is, who will undertake these rescue missions?" The room filled with volunteers. Bonded pairs, young and old, soldiers and scientists, all united in purpose. Jake smiled. 6 months ago, he'd saved one scared hatchling in a desert. Now, thousands stood ready to do the same across the galaxy. The Devourers were just the beginning, Cythera continued. The galaxy holds many dangers, many wonders, but facing them together, bonded in trust and purpose, what can stand against us? As the assembly erupted in planning and preparation, Jake felt a touch on his mind. Not Cythera, but Cythera herself. "You asked for nothing but friendship," the ancient dragon said privately. "Yet you gave us so much more. You gave us family. The dragon clans will remember this for all time. The human who saved a hatchling, and in doing so, saved us all." "I just did what anyone would do," Jake said. "No," Cythera replied gently. "You did what you would do. And that made all the difference." Years later, historians would mark this as the turning point. Not the first contact, not the battle with the Devourers, but the moment one human chose kindness over protocol. The ripples of that choice spread across the galaxy, as bonded pairs explored unknown worlds, rescued lost children of a dozen species, and built bridges between civilizations that had never imagined unity. The Dragon-Human Alliance became the foundation of galactic peace, a testament to the power of compassion across species lines, and at its heart was the story everyone knew. The miner who saved a dragon, and the dragon who saved humanity in return. But for Jake and Sithara, flying together through alien skies on their way to another rescue, it was simpler than that. They were family, bonded by choice and strengthened by trust. And in the end, that was what really mattered. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and terrors, but they would face it together, one rescue at a time, one friendship at a time, proving with every choice that kindness was the strongest force in the universe. And it all started with a scanner's beep in a purple desert and a choice to help someone in need.